Hello, my fellow YouTubers. This is Roy back again. This episode is going to start off the one of 15 that's going to get us to levitation using electromagnetic waves. Starting with electromagnetic waves. Let's get right to it. Leave your comments. Love your comments. Bring them on. I don't care what you say, how you say it. Bring them on. Let's start off with something. See what you're looking at? Iron pipe. So right here, it was probably 4 months ago, and I was kind of like talking to Ed. And I said to Ed, I said, why would you have two pipes? Like, see that pipe? So my pipe is always, this is the pipe I started with. And before I went down the Coral Castle, and I measured certain things. Well, I went the first time, went the second time, and on the third time I went, I realized I need to measure the pipe. The depth of the pipe, where it stops, and the diameter. So I was anxious, and I put mine in. When you look at the pictures, it looks like that's it. In reality, this is it. So inside diameter here is more like 3, and inside Ed's pipe, outside diameter is 2 1/4, just like 1/16 over it, and the inside is 1 and almost I'd say almost 7/8, but a little less. And the question I asked Ed, I said, Ed, I don't know, Ed and I talk. Sometimes I'm straight, sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I'm drinking some beers. But I said, Ed, I said, what's behind that white stuff in the back? And he said to me, he goes, I'm covering up the other ground. And so is my hand. I said, what do you mean by the other ground? See that pipe? See the condenser? He's got 2 of them on top of that pipe. Then he's got the same thing inside that white panel that's in that corner. He's got a pipe, and he's also got 2 condensers. And why would he do that? What would be the reason? Of course, he's got this bar coming across. That's holding down electromagnetic transformer, we'll call it. It would be a smaller PMH like this with copper or iron, probably copper. And the iron is that the chains come off of right there. Let's get you guys some opticals. What opticals could I find for you? Let me see. We're gonna look inside the magnifying glass. See if I can get you in the middle between me and the magnifying glass. And let's look at this picture a little better. So if you look at that pipe, that's a glass jar right there. It's a glass jar, and it's actually 2, and on top of it, it looks like he has metal bars. You see right there in that top corner, and it comes down, and then it's wrapped with some baling wire. So maybe he's doing 2 things here. On the glass jars, he's using iron wire, And that iron wire is bringing along with it some permeability and some lag time, but not much. And then in that back panel over there, he has the same setup. And why would he do that? You can see the box in the front. I call it electromagnetic transformer. But if the positive and negative is crossed in front of a smaller PMH inside that box, and on the back side of that box, you can see that there's a bolt that runs along horizontally, and there's a nut, and the end of the bolt is a nut. And basically, he's got two chains and a wire, and the wire comes up, runs across, and runs right to that top of that condenser, we're going to call it. And the iron comes, chains come down and come and wrap around all this stuff, come around and go back to the hook along the top of the handle. All right. So, and there is a wire that comes up and runs. You can see it. In fact, you can see it right there. It runs up right there, and it goes to that baling wire. So one thing I learned about chains, which is very interesting, and we're going to do one of the seminars, 15 seminars from this video on how to get to levitation through Ed Leedskalnin. This one seminar, I don't know what number it's going to be in, but it's going to be in a position on how critical it is, because allowing the chains to be present, the chains will, per loop, will decide which pole that they are. And what I mean by that is, here you got south, north, south, north, south, north, south. And then when I wrap these, on you look back in previous videos, you'll notice I wrap these vertical. No, I wrapped them clockwise and counterclockwise. Now I can tell you, it's been a while, but I'm going to reflect on my memory, is that when I wound the south facing me, I went counterclockwise. When I went a north facing me, I went clockwise. I'd have to recheck, but it's easy to check it because you just wrap 10 turns and then come this way and wrap 10 turns on 2 pieces of iron, and the front of those irons facing you will have 2 different poles. If I got them backwards, I'm sorry. But anyway, I don't think I do. Anyway, you have 2 different poles. And the chains will pick up that and run with that all the way down through the chains. So when you see chains running through Ed's, he's showing off iron up here. He don't need to have this hanging. He don't need to have all this and the bike next to this opening here and wrapped with chains, and then chains coming down, and they're heading downward because they're heavy. And then somehow they come back up and involve themselves. Now if you look at this chain, you're going to see that it's tight. What do I do with that glass? Okay. If you look at that chain's tense. The only time you see chain like that is if you magnetically, if you take 2 ends of a car battery and touch the chain, that happens to the chain. The chain binds up. So you got a binding chain there. You got multiple polarities hovering over Ed's wheel, and then you see the metal hook coming down, and the hook's got a spark gap right there. So every time that wheel comes around, hits that near that spark gap should ignite. I wouldn't want my hand there. I'm thinking that in this picture he's turning towards that, then he's going to let it go, and then when it sparks down and sparks through, it does a strong electromagnetic pulse, which obviously follows through the chain back out, comes back in within itself, and allows this. I would think the wheel would turn on its own, but with having that pipe, in the backdrop there of that white, you would be able to create a scalar wave, because you would be able to take both of those electromagnetic pulses, which are simultaneously running off the same gear wheel, and if they were in sequence to go off and each one was out of phase from each other, it'd be easy to do with the wheel. So this is exactly the video that we're going to get into, where we take this pole and we move it over to this side, and we're going to take a grounding rod, 8-footer, and we're going to drive it in the ground, drill a hole, 8-foot grounding rod, which is iron in the middle and copper on the outside, and then it'll be attached to this pipe, which will be sitting there. You'll see the PMH will follow Ed's specifications. We'll even could use, well, we'll use these PMHs, but we could use this because this fits, and this fits perfectly to this as well. These are just stretched out longer. I don't think it really matters. But if we were to have 2 of those and the coils wound appropriately, same length of wire, the same exactly, but when they both went off, they both went off exactly 180 degrees from each other simultaneously. When you come out of both of those, you come into a situation where it's going to cancel itself. Well, the 2 apparatuses, which would be 2 more PMHs, or do we send them into capacitors, condensers back in that day? That's a good question for you guys to leave out, because I know what the answer is. But it could be PMHs with iron core striking each other to formulate a figure 8. So if you were to take this one here and this one here, and you were to wound these coils to where this one's making this south, this one's north, this one's north, this one's south, and they're both going off, would be one thing. But if you were to wound this where it's south and this is north, and this is south and this is north, when they both go off, what's going to happen? All of a sudden, this will be out of phase. So when this is south, this is north. When this is north, this is south. And when they're both striked, the bell is rung. And what will happen is, in between the space, the chamber that's in between there will be like the bell being struck twice. And what you'll have is a dipole that's prearranged to be a 2-source dipole. When dipoles are one source of energy and the other side is the opposing side of the strike, which we're talking about scalar waves here in nature. We're talking Ed Leedskalnin now, to where we would have south naturally, but if they're both being struck at the same time, the opposing field shows up here of this field, and the chamber in between becomes activated with a scalar wave. The scalar wave is picking energy from both sides and also on this side. So now you have a quad scalar wave. A quad, you're actually pulling energy from 4 sources versus 1. Here you're pulling from 1 source, because if this is positive, this is negative, and this is negative and this is positive. You're pulling from 2 sources. But when you have a chamber in the middle, and your pickups are crystals, which we're going to get into, which will take that vibration and control it into a certain frequency. And when you come out of that certain frequency, it brings us into another video, and we'll talk about that. But this is how you derive from having the question answered by Mr. Ed Leedskalnin through me, is that you need 2 grounds. So you need a ground here, and then you need a ground there. And simultaneously, when one is going off, the other is going off. And they are doing that through the source of one pulling energy from their individual connection to ground. And 2 is, we'll show the black box's importance, where it has on top here a black box. Well, a box. And it's not necessary. It does a couple fold. One, it protects the top of the timbers, and you put creosote on the top, and you put the box on top, and you make it goopy, and the box won't come off. It just keeps the average rain, which is acid rain, off of it. The second thing is, you can see coming down, he had bought from the railroad, Flagler Railroad, when it went out of business. It sold its railroad tracks to the state of Florida. He picked up the hoist. He took that, a couple of them. So that hoist you see that's sitting right there is hanging from there. And he's also got another thing hanging from there. He's got not only the chains, which you have your basic weights and measures, but he also has cables coming down. And these cables do come out on the sides, and he has a hole drilled down about 8 inches down on either side, and he's got metal pegs into the oolite, the coral rock, but the cables do stretch out on both sides. And you can see that it's all linched up to the top, and he's obviously got bolts going through the top holding all this, which is a lot of weight. He's lifted up a lot of stuff. And there it is. So when that appeared, he was all done with this. He was done building, and he moved on to his studies here. But he did have a couple of them, so who knows? But I'm pretty sure when Mr. Can book, that one shows that he had a few of them. And the other thing I want you to notice in this picture is that back whiteboard, the first pipe. You can see the baling wires on the pipe. So he's showing that the iron is very important. And the reason that is that everything in the ground is in pockets. So if you think about the dirt and earth, the soil, which is more growing soil than anything, of pockets of anything, even though some stuff comes rips its head to the surface, but it's really in pockets of the world. But in majority, everybody has growing soil, sand. So it eliminates the area from having the metals it needs, but it does have powdered aluminum. That's how they get aluminum. Aluminum is the majority metal in the whole world, more than iron, the abundant, and it's in powder form. There's no pockets like iron that you would get, or iron ore that's attached to rock, or copper ores, or silver ores, or gold ores. You're looking at aluminum, which obviously must be a meteorite that approached our Earth, smashed itself, and spread itself out through the whole surface, because they're finding it, 80 feet deep, I believe, around the whole entire planet. So aluminum. So that would make our surface of our aluminum, of our planet, whether it's got water on it, or rock, or boulders, or whatever, that it's very very reactive to a magnetic field in an electric way. So it's almost you're 90 degrees off from electric to magnetism. So when you get a magnetism field, which when we take a compass, we can hold a compass up in our hand. If you hold the compass vertically, it ain't doing nothing. If you hold it horizontally, it does something. So that goes to show you that the waves are traveling across the surface of the earth. And at least in the compass wise, it's not so much traveling vertically, horizontally. So with that being said, leave your comments that it is moving across, and it 90 degrees from that would be your electric. And if you look how lightning strikes, oh my lord, it's happens to be 90 degrees off the bend. So if you look at that L, finger going straight up, thumb going straight out, there goes this right here is your electric, this here is your electromagnetism. Because a compass will only read this way, not vertically. So by nature shows you the direction and the flow. I also would like to bring to your attention that the next 15 episodes or videos that I'm going to post to get to levitation, meaning floating a rock, iron, copper, gold, anything that is of substance that we can put in our hand, plastics, through electromagnetic induction, will show you guys that Ed Leedskalnin did levitate the rocks. That he realized from his first location, because he had the same setup, that he went from small rocks to bigger rocks. He did have the wheel at the first location because that's where he filed his patent. And when he refused to give up to the two patent agents, the machine, when they came to visit, 2 days later, thugs came and robbed him and beat him nearly to death. But they couldn't get apart the wheel or anything, but they came and beat him to death, almost to death. He recovered from that, again, the second time a recovery for Ed Leedskalnin, thank God to the people who were looking out after him when he had tuberculosis, coming from the range of Washington, where the big sequoias are. Beautiful state of Washington. He had to deal with coming back to life again, in a sense, where he was beat up brutally. And at that point, the realtors who sold him that property, or gave him that original first property, we had Rockgate, where he had smaller boulders on the whole outside perimeter wall, and he was dealing with the still doing carvings and stuff. But he did know about and did put a patent back there at the first location. So it goes to show you that he was able to, based on some of the storyline or affidavits, to where he was able to have the flatbed truck be pulled up, guy leaves for an hour, comes back, it's loaded, and there's no equipment. So how was that all done? So he's not moving those big tripods around. He supposedly, in affidavit, had 2 cones, and the cones were shaped like these cones. And he put the cones up, and they were screeching and howling, and up to the boulder, and the boulder lifted up, and he moved the cones over, and where he moved the cones, the oolite, or the coral rock, you can call it, had moved along with it, and he was able to move stuff that way. Interesting concept. Never really thought he did it. Now I know that it is true, and 15 videos are going to get you guys to the end. And then you'll be able to build it yourself. Use electromagnetism to create a longitudinal wave. At that point, you're going to create a scalar wave. And I'm going to teach you how to build antennas and cones to allow a certain frequency. And the key thing here is the frequency of anything is particular. That's why crystals with Dr. Korsky back in 1917, 1918, he was working on a constant frequency through using crystals. and he found a lot of other stuff that came along with it. So obviously Ed did too. And this is where all this raw stuff comes in, because it shows you how you got there. And you're able to use the crystals, because the crystals levitated themselves. And not only did the crystals levitate, but they also increased their size 20-fold over. So if you were able to take any object and use a constant frequency to it and allow a scalar wave to be trapped within that element or elements, you're able to manipulate it to not melt, like how we use induction heating to melt iron or so forth, copper or whatever. But it's a frequency different, out of phase, I would almost say, of destroying something. Now it just it makes it weightless. I want you guys to leave your comments. Peace out. Love you all. Stay safe. Don't get political. Just fight for your right. Love you all. Peace out.